Hello and welcome to Niche References, where I yap about my niche interests so that I don't annoy my friends and family with them. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be yapping about my favorite TV show of all time, The Genius. The brand new UK adaptation is currently airing and flopping, so it seemed like the perfect time to return to the absolute perfection of the OG Korean show. Today I'm going to be ranking all of the main matches from The Genius Season 1 Rules of the Game. This is the first in a series of main match and player rankings that I intend to do for each of the 4 seasons of the show, and hopefully I will get all of those done within the next few weeks as I rewatch the show. In ranking these main matches, there are 3 factors that I have taken into consideration. First, the game design. Is it designed in a way that will almost always lead to entertaining TV and interesting strategy, or is it easily breakable or fundamentally flawed in some way? Second is the results-oriented factor, aka did this specific iteration of the game end up being exciting and riveting gameplay, or did the players just take the safest possible route through? And third and final, my own personal bias. Did I find the game entertaining? Is it the type of game I find compelling? Because I'm always going to take my own bias into account in some way, shape, or form. Enough preamble, you're here for the ranking of the main matches, so let's jump right into it. Placing number 11, the main match in dead last place, should be no surprise to anyone who has watched Season 1 of The Genius. It's Abundance and Famine. In this game, players travel to either Abundance Land or Famine Land to collect bread, but if the number of players in a land exceeds the number of bread available in that land, none of them get bread that round. The player with the most bread by the end is the winner, and the player with the least is the death match candidate. Abundance and Famine is a fundamentally flawed game design that's broken from the start. The Genius could run this game 100 times, and I believe that 100 times out of 100, a majority will form to ice out a minority, because that's just the obvious safest way for a majority to avoid coming in last place. It's not even necessarily good or interesting strategy, it's just the obvious safest move, which is boring to watch. So boring, in fact, that it was reduced to a montage. And to make things even worse, the majority miscalculated their tickets and almost messed up their extremely simple strategy, but then they just realized they could buy extra tickets, so they're fine. That mechanic shouldn't have even been in play. The Majority Alliance fumbled their simple strategy so badly and were boring, they don't deserve to be saved. This game is just never going to lead to the level of fun, complex gameplay that every single other main match this season has. The only good thing I can say about this game is that I found it funny when Chang Yup fully went through the motions of pretending to purchase a ticket for zero reason at all. He was willing to entertain us when absolutely no one else this episode would. What a king. So we all knew Abundance and Famine would be 11 out of 11, last place. So what is second to last? That, for me, is Confined Scamming Horse Race. This is, of course, a modified version of a game that was played earlier in the season. The players are separated into individual rooms and must rely on a partner from their real life to play the game for them and bet on horses to win a race based on the clues provided to them. This is a game where I really have to separate my love of the episode from my hatred of this game, because Haha's antics and Sungkyu's letters to his beloved Sangmin Sunbae are so much fun. Sungkyu is so dramatic, and for what? I love him so much, and this is one of my favorite moments of the entire season. But I almost always dislike these loved ones versions of Genius games, and I especially hate them when the players themselves don't have control of their own destiny. And on top of that, it comes near the end of the season when only the best players remain, especially in this season. This top 4 is so elite. And as a Sungkyu fan, it is painful to watch him shouting instructions to his CEO that are being blatantly ignored, as if that man knows better than Sungkyu, who's already survived 9 rounds of The Genius. I think not. The original Scamming Horse Race is a great game that I'll discuss in more detail later in the ranking, but this is a definitively worse version of it that plays out in a very frustrating way. Coming in at number 9 on this ranking is Election Game. In this game, players can run for president. The winner of the election is the winner of the main match, while the candidate with the least votes is the death match candidate. Election Game is a perfectly fine game, but I think it ends up being one of the less compelling, more forgettable games when considering the season as a whole. I think there are a lot of interesting components to the game, but most of them get kind of brushed over in favor of giving us a compelling twist. And to be fair, this game does have one of the bigger twists of the season, but I think it's only a compelling twist on first watch. On a rewatch, you know that pretty much everything being presented to you for most of the main match is a lie. So a lot of what you're watching feels really pointless. Most of the episode is rendered completely irrelevant, and you only get presented with the reality of the situation in very brief flashbacks. I love the rewind editing as much as the next person, but I think that this is one of the very rare instances that it does a disservice to the storytelling, and I almost wish I had a version of the game where we're shown the real story in real time, or at least a little bit earlier. All in all, Election Game is fine, but it's definitely not one of the games that I look forward to watching on a rewatch. In 8th place is Catch the Burglar. In this game, players are divided into a large town and a small town, and one player is chosen as the burglar. Each night, one player from each town must be exiled to the other town, while the burglar steals money from anyone in the town with them. At the end of the game, the least wealthy person in the town with the burglar is the death match candidate. Catch the Burglar is a really fun concept and one that I really like, but it's also one of the easiest games to break. Once the burglar has been identified, a town can hold on to them until the very last round and then exile the burglar to the other town, thus dooming the other town and saving themselves. It's an incredibly straightforward strategy. Unfortunately, the way the game played out was just full of fumbles from nearly everyone involved. Seong-gyu revealed his role as the burglar to Kyungran and Sang-min in an attempt to align with them, but they completely shot him down, only to immediately realize their mistake and try to make amends. And somehow that I still have yet to wrap my head around, the large town fumbled even harder, allowing the minority alliance of Kyungran, Sang-min, and Yuram to gain a majority in the large town, thus securing their own safety and the control of the burglar. Plus, this is also the game where Gura decides to go full grumpy old man and refuses to engage in a game of rock, paper, scissors. It's kind of funny, but it's also basically giving up, which you never like to see. In the end, the game is pretty entertaining to watch, but mostly just because no one is playing optimally, and that's kind of funny to watch. Coming in at number 7 is Expression Auction. In this game, the goal is to create an equation equaling exactly 10. Players create these equations by using a set of numbered blocks to bid on numbers and symbols in a predetermined order. The auction stops immediately when an equation equaling 10 is created, and that player is the winner. Anyone without a complete equation, or the player with the equation furthest from 10, is the loser. For me, Expression Auction is one of those main matches that is perfectly fine and solid, but not one I personally love. It's not one of the games with an obvious flaw or an obvious hack, and it's also not really one with a huge plot twist moment. Honestly, I kinda just forget it exists most of the time. I think the inclusion of the bid for the 11 block ends up cheapening it a bit and allows the game to get cut off at the knees right before it had the chance to get really interesting and cutthroat. A lot of the game's interest hinges around being able to completely block a tile by bidding the same amount as another player, and the 11 cube just completely removes that possibility, essentially handing the win to the player who can pay the most garnets for that cube. Unfortunately, apart from that 11 cube, this game is just one that I don't have a ton of commentary on personally, because it just ends up being a solid but kinda unremarkable game for me when considering the season as a whole. Next up in 6th place, it's a big one. It's the 1-2-3 game. In this game, players are given 9 cards, 3 1s, 3 2s, 3 3s. They use these cards to play 1v1 matchups with the higher of the 2 cards winning. Any player with a card remaining at the end of the game is automatically dropped to 0 wins and becomes the deathmatch candidate. In this iteration of the game with an odd number of players, someone is always going to have a card remaining, thus dooming them to the deathmatch. And then of course the player with the most matchup wins is the main match winner. I think a lot of people might have this one lower on their list, but in my opinion, it's perfect in its simplicity and was the absolutely ideal choice for the very first game in the Genius. It's really a perfect encapsulation of the entirety of the Genius Season 1 in a single game. The safe, simple strategy of pairing up and getting 3 wins is quickly presented by Teacher Cha and then executed by safe players like Eunji and Yuram. And then clever players like Chang Yup and Chungmoon also quickly figure out a slightly better version of that strategy where they can each get 4 wins. Most of the dominant players of the season immediately come together to form a somewhat antagonistic alliance to propel one player, Seongyu, to victory. And then somewhere in the corner is Jinho forming an excellent strategy that he'll never actually execute, only to somehow stumble into a win anyway. In the simplicity of its game design, it inherently has many layers of strategy for the players that are actually willing to look for them. It's just such a good starter game to show everyone's baseline playstyle and really get a feel for who these players are and what the Genius is all about. It's the perfect encapsulation of the Genius Season 1 in a single game. Tell me I'm wrong, I dare you. In 5th place is, fittingly, the 5-5 game. In this game, the players ask 10 guests yes or no questions and must attempt to get a 5-5 split for each answer. The player with the most 5-5 split answers wins. I think my love of this game might be a little bit of a hot take, but I love it for many of the same reasons as I love the 1-2-3 game, and I love that they bookend the season. Depending on how you look at it, this game is either very simple or very difficult on first glance, but it allows for each individual player's playstyle to shine through, which is something I really love about it. Kyungran takes meticulous notes and asks very straightforward, objective, data-based questions. And then there's Sangmin, who flies by the seat of his pants using his intuition and observational skills to work with what's directly in front of him. And then Jinho makes the lateral thinking move of interacting with exactly 5 of the guests to create new information, rubbing their hands, telling them they're pretty, telling them his brother's name, etc. It's obviously a game that can be figured out pretty quickly, but it works just long enough to be interesting, and I found it really compelling to watch each player solve the game in ways that were so specific to each of their personalities and playstyles, which in my mind kind of makes it the perfect final main match of the season. Coming in at 4th place is Open Pass. In this game, players use a deck of 20 cards to create an equation. They must create a deck of numbers and symbols, which will then get shuffled. One by one, the cards will be presented face down, and the players must choose whether to open by flipping them over and adding them to the equation, or pass and move on to the next card. The player whose equation totals the most is the winner, while the least is the deathmatch candidate. In the past, this was my #1 game of the season, and it all really just came down to the best twist of the entire season, Jinho hacking the game by using the direction of the back of the cards. Seeing him on the outs, seemingly without a real strategy and without realizing the intended hack of the game, just for extreme ways to start playing and hit us with him figuring out a hack that wasn't even supposed to be a hack. It's such an iconic moment, and it still gives me chills every time I watch it. But other than the big plot twist, the game kind of ends up being just a bit of a Garnet war. And nearly everyone else made a terrible deck of cards. They've got symbols mixed in with numbers, they're leaving stray pluses in for no reason. Just get enough red cards that you can have numbers one color, multiplication another color. Don't waste money on blue packs, don't mix numbers and symbols. It should not have been that complicated. I think Sangmin was the only one who did it correctly. I love a game with a hack, but I think this one is not one of the more interesting games at baseline, and apart from Jinho discovering that absolutely god-tier hack that shouldn't have even existed, no one else played this one particularly well. Top 3 time, and in 3rd place is Scamming Horse Race. In this game, players are given hints as to the placement of horses in a race. They use these hints to bet on the horses, with only the top 2 horses giving payouts. The player who earns the most from their bets is the winner, and the player with the least is the death match candidate. This is my favorite style of game in the Genius, an information battle in the style of a logic puzzle where players each have pieces of information they can strategically share with each other. It's not hard to crack the puzzle if you have enough information, but you have to trust that everyone is telling the truth, and in this one, they were not. I think games like this are excellent combinations of both the social aspect and the strategic aspect of the Genius. You have to have the social bonds to be able to convince people to share information with you, but you also have to have a high level of strategy to be able to properly manage your betting and what you choose to share with others. This style of game isn't always the most flashy type of game in the Genius, but it's so solid and always a fun time. Second place in this ranking, but first place in my heart, is Zombie Game. In this game, 2 players are designated as zombies, and all of the other players are humans. The goal of the human players is to earn points by touching other humans, but the goal of the zombies is to turn all of the humans into zombies by touching them. At the end of the game, the remaining human with the most points wins, and the human with the least points is the deathmatch candidate. And if all humans are tied in points, they choose among the zombies for who will be the deathmatch candidate. Zombie Game has always been my favorite game from Season 1 because I love werewolf-style games and whodunits. This time around, it's in second place because I think another game is technically better, but this one is my personal favorite. I think the one flaw in the game is that the humans will almost always try to go for a joint win, but as we saw in this playthrough, that's easier said than done. Sangmin drinking Changyop's spit water remains one of the funniest things from this season, as is his subsequent frantic running around looking for a new cure. There's so much active gameplay during this main match, even though a lot of it is really messy. The logic isn't always logicking from some of the players. I still don't know why Songgyu chose to ride so hard for Gura, but it was entertaining to watch. And that's the thing, the big moves and twists and turns along the way are so much fun that I don't mind that they're really messy. The only person whose gameplay actually frustrates me here is Chungmoon, but that's kind of par for the course with me and Chungmoon, so I'll save my Chungmoon rant for the player rankings. And in first place, the only main match left, surprising even me, it's Junho's game, it's Kong's Dilemma. In this game, players are divided into 2 teams and given 10 beans per person. The game is played across 5 rounds, with the first team to 3 wins declared the winner. A team wins a round by placing more beans in the vase than the opposing team, but the individual players are incentivized to retain their own beans because the player on the losing team with the least beans is the deathmatch candidate, while the player with the most beans remaining on the winning team is the winner. Kong's Dilemma ends up in first place for me for the simple fact that it is designed to create drama. The game, by its own design, incentivizes players to betray their own team in favor of helping the other team, and it is so much fun to see both Sungmin and Songgyu latch onto that aspect so quickly. There are so many layers of lying and manipulation going on at any given point in this game. It's so much fun. Sungmin lying to his own team, Sungmin lying to the other team that he's supposedly helping, Sungmin lying to Songgyu, who he's supposed to be in a Sunbae-Hubei alliance with, and he's never supposed to desert his Hubei, Songgyu lying to his own team. It's just so much lying and manipulation, and it's so much fun. At its core, it's a leveling war, and adding the backstabbing on top of that makes it the most compelling game across the season in both design and in outcome. So, those are my rankings of the main matches from Season 1 of The Genius, Rules of the Game. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, I've embarked on a full rewatch of the show and should have my Season 1 player rankings out soon, followed by Season 2 discussions. It'll be interesting trying to do the Season 2 rankings because I've watched Season 1 at least double the times I've seen Season 2, and the Season 1 rankings have been nearly impossible, so I can't even begin to fathom how difficult Season 2 will be. Honestly, I am just kind of still struggling to wrap my head around the fact that both of my favorite long-ended shows, The Genius and The Mole, have been dug up from their graves and revived within the past few years. It's an absolutely wild time to be a fan of social strategy reality shows, and I couldn't be more excited to be here, even if the remakes of my shows are dumpster fires, like they mostly are. So if you enjoyed this ranking and want to see all of the other genius content that I'm cooking up, please go ahead and subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're currently listening on. You can also follow my Instagram if you want to be up to date on upcoming content. The link is in the description. And as always, thank you so much for coming along with me as I made some niche references.